Hi guys. An important part of the modern day of MTTs is that we start to face big sizings. In the past, we've studied a lot about using small sizings and facing small sizings, but now big sizings, especially on disconnected lowish boards or medium board textures, we see a lot of bigger betting going on. So this is going to be a situation cut off against big blind. We are going to see a board texture of 974, and we're around about 50 big blinds deep. What we can see from this kind of situation is often our opponent's going to use a big sizing. So I've done a sim here where I've only allowed imposition to use a big sizing because if you're playing against a lot of players, and especially moving forward in the future, a lot of players will only be using a bigger size on this board texture. So if you do see someone using a small size, I think it's a good spot to go after them because they're very, very, very incentivized to size up tens, jacks, queens, kings, aces, pocket fours, ace nine, stuff like that. So when you do face a small size, and first of all, I'd say very good to start check raising people. Second of all, I would say it's important to know what sizing we want to check raise versus a large sizing and how we want to continue. So we can see here that I've allowed out of position and multiple different raise sizings. So we can min raise or like 2.05x, we can 2.15x, we can 2.3x, we can 2.5x, we can 2.8x, and we can raise all in. So I've allowed 6 different sizings here for the out of position player. I think this is, very thorough, and it's going to give us a good picture of what sizing we want to use. Before looking into the results, I think it makes sense to always use a very small sizing. On this kind of board, when we face a large size, typically we're going to face a large sizing with a polarized range. So they're going to use a large sizing and they're not going to bet a hand like king queen, or they're not going to bet a hand like, pocket threes, or they're not going to bet a hand like ace king off as often, or like ace 10, no backdoor flush draw, hands like that. So because of that, I think when we raise, essentially, we're trying to just target their bluffs, their king eights, their the queen five suited, stuff like that. So when we're trying to target those kind of hands, it makes more sense, in my opinion, to just use a small sizing to, make queen eight fold, make king eight fold, make king 10 fold, stuff like that. So because of that, I think usually we want to use a pretty small sizing. But let's have a look at what the solver says. We have a check from out of position, and we can see here that there is a lot of betting going on, but still lots of checks. You can see a lot of the checking range is going to come from the 7x hands because we have a polarized range. We don't want to bet the medium part of our range so much. It's going to come from some underpairs like sixes, threes, twos, like I said, and then some ace kings, some ace tens as well. So that's where the majority of our checking range is going to come from. And the medium parts of our range, like queen 8, jack 8, a hand like jack 10, they're going to be very, very high frequency bets. Versus a bet, I believe our opponent will shove with jack 10 suited, maybe. Maybe not. Maybe just it'll be interesting what jack 10 suited does. I think if you're 30 big blinds deep, jack 10 always plays as a shove against a bet. But the majority of the time, we're going to use a small sizing, I think. And we're probably going to end up folding here, relatively often too. So we go for the big bet, and we can see here, this is really good to see. So you can see here we have the 6 different raise sizings. We can see, first of all, there's loads of folds going on. We can see jack 10 suited does actually shove sometimes, which is interesting, even for 50 big blinds. But by far, our most common raise size here is going to be it's going to be the min raise, essentially, the 2.05x raise size. So that's really good to see. We don't want to go big. We're only interested in going small, because when we go small, you can see that we just make the order folds fold. So hands like king 5, queen 5, queen 6, jack 6, ace jack off, ace queen off, ace 10 off, ace 8 off, king 8 off. Just, we get the auto folds to fold for so cheap. So what I'm going to do now is just rerun this sim again to make it more efficient. And I'm only going to allow out of position to use a 2.05x raise size. This way we don't start muddling up the game tree and we just play one consistent strategy, because, I don't want to start raising, 2.5x 1% of the time and all that kind of stuff. So all we're going to do is allow out of position to go for a 2.05x sizing. We're going to run this and then see how we can look into the strategy a little bit deeper. Okay, so this is stop running now. Stop running now. Run it to a decent enough accuracy. Again, just to remind ourselves, we've only allowed in position to use a 75% sizing, and we've only allowed out of position to raise 2.05x because we know this is the most frequent bet sizings, or the most frequent raise size, and we've just run that before, which is what I've just shown you. So this, we can see that out of position goes for, in position goes for a very heavy check raise, very heavy c-bet, sorry. And versus this, we're going to check raise. You can see a few things. First of all, our 9x is not check raising versus a polarized range. The reason why it's not check raising versus a polarized range is because we're not going to be up against worse hands. When we're facing this really big bet, the underpairs like sixes are not betting so much, but the overpairs are always betting. So when we start putting in loads of money, we start getting into a really difficult situation where our opponent's going to just be continuing with hands that do really well against us. Either hands which have us dominated, hands which have us crushed, or hands which have pretty good equity against us. So we don't need to deny so much equity with our weakish 9x. But if we do have a hand like ace 9 or king 9, we are incentivized to put money in, because if we remind ourselves of the imposition's range, here's a bunch of 9x, 10 9, jack 9, queen 9, king 9, ace 9, and they're all offsuit combinations too, of course. So out of position wants to make sure that he gets raises in with his ace 9 and king 9 for value against the worst 9x, because that's going to be a relatively crucial part of the strategy. We can see here that there's no slow playing with 7-4, but we do slow play 9-7. We slow play 9-7 because when we have 9-7 and our opponent has an overpair, we're going to stack him very, very, very often. When he has a hand like king queen, or when he's bluffing with a hand like, you know, queen jack suited, we want him to turn equity and start putting in really big bets on the turn. So yeah, jack 10 suited is always going to be the combo which we kind of go to for shoving here, even for 50 big blinds. It's just a hand which does really well. If we do get called from ace 9, we have really good equity. We have 4 8s, 3 jacks, 3 10s, and the backdoor flush draw. We can see jack 10 of hearts is playing really passive here. We can see we do some raising with some like 7x, like hands like 6-7 suited, hands like 4-3 suited. So we check raise these hands for a little bit of protection, because if our opponent is bluffing with, say, king 8 suited, then when we have 7-6 ourselves, we actually start to benefit from some fold equity. When we have 4-3, we start to benefit from some fold equity. And the reason why 4-3 is a more attractive check raise than, let's say, jack 9 is because the jack interacts a lot with the bet folding range of imposition, whereas the 4 and the 3, he never really has a 3 when he bet folds, or like when he bets. If we look at the imposition's range here, there's just so few 3x in the range, no offsuit 3x, even ace 3 offsuits folding, and then only a little bit of ace 3 suited and king 3 suited. So versus this strategy, we're going to see that we go for a very, very heavy call, very, very heavy call. But when we do go for a raise, our opponent is supposed to call really wide. So hands like king 6 suited, king 8 suited, queen 8 suited, jack 8 suited, jack 8 suited, 10 8 suited are reasonable, I think. I think some of the other hands will fold. I think we're going to see like king 10 off, king jack off, king queen off always fold. So yeah, I think what's going to happen here is we're going to see a little bit of overfolding. So all I'm going to do is node lock very, very slightly. So right now we're folding 33% of the time. I'm just going to node lock the hands which I think always will fold for the imposition player. So I think king 5 will always fold, king 6 will always fold, king 8 will always fold. I don't think king 10, king jack suited will always fold necessarily. I think a hand like jack 10 won't fold. I think queen 10 will always fold, queen jack will always fold, king queen will always fold, king 10 will always fold, king jack will always fold, ace 5 and ace 6. These are already 99% raises, but I'm just putting what I think the ranges will be. Ace 3, ace 2, I think for sure folding. Queen 5, I'm moving this from 99% to 100%, so don't go crazy on me. Again, I'm just going full frequency, so it's easier for us to visualize. You know, the pairs, whatever, it's fine. I don't think any of the 9x will fold. I don't think any gut shots will fold. I don't think any 7x will fold. I think queen 8 suited will fold. I think ace 8 suited will mostly fold. Let's just give it 50% for ace 8 suited. And then let's give 50% for king 10 suited, king jack suited, king queen suited, and queen jack suited. I think this is kind of reasonable for someone how they defend versus a raise. So versus this, I'm going to lock all combos. Remember that before it was 33%, now we've made it 44%. Before the response versus a bet was we have 9% check raises. What we're going to do now is run this again and see how often we check raise. So before, reminder, we were calling 43 and raising 9. Let's see what happens now when we go for this strategy. I'm going to run this and we're going to evaluate when I get back. Okay, so we have the board here. We can see 974. We can see the array size from out of position. We can see everything going on here really nicely. And we can see here, we have made him keep his betting frequency the same on flop, around about 70%. And yeah, this is going to be the bet. And then you can see now everything changes completely just from him folding. It's not even an overfold. It's not even an overfold at all. We essentially get this really, really, really cheap check raise bluff with all of our combos, value, protection, bluff, everything. It's such a cheap price, and our opponent because our opponent folds 50% to a min check raise, which is pretty reasonable, right? Like his range for betting is like probably something like 60-40 in terms of value versus bluffs in terms of a polarization. But we fold out around about 50% of the range because some queen jack suited will defend, some king jack suited will defend, some ace x suited will defend, some some 6x whatever it may be, they may defend sometimes. Like some 8-6 will defend even though it's like the bluffing part of the polarization of the range. They're still going to defend sometimes. Like 10-6 is a good shot, this is going to defend. But just from this one little tiny tweak of just making him fold these slightly more combos than he's supposed to do, which is going to be these combos here, like king 6 suited, queen 6 suited, jack 6 suited, queen 8 suited, king 8 suited, these offsuit high cards, which is just like so realistic and reasonable for me. Just from this small little tweak, we can see that we play pure check raise versus large sizing, and we have no hand here, which is really incentivized to go for a check call. Because if we have a 4, we're like, okay, well, we're going to protect our hand and get 50% fold equity straight away. Amazing. If we have the 7, straight away, same story. If we have a 9, we're like, okay, well, this is great. We can get value, and also we can fold out so many hands with so much equity. If we have just a terrible hand like queen 5, our opponent is just folding way too much. And in reality, I think when we do raise, we may even get more folds. Like there may be some more folding happening from some hands, like maybe some more queen jack folds, or maybe some more king jack folds, or maybe some ace king off doesn't free bet, stuff like that. So yeah, I think this is like really, really reasonable. And yeah, I think this is exactly what I'm trying to show, is that versus big bets, going for this min raise works out really, really well because people are just going to fold a lot. They have to defend so wide and they're just not going to do it. So yeah, I think this has been a good visualization about how wide people are supposed to defend in these kind of situations when they use a big sizing. And again, if they start using a smaller sizing too, what ends up just happening here is that we get our opponent to they'll end up putting their weak hands in the small range and their strong hands in the bigger range, and because of that we can really go after that small sizing too. Let's have a look at another board anyway, just to see about some consistency. So let's look at an 8-high board. So 8-4-3 rainbow. It says this sometimes, I'm not sure why exactly. I just need to restart PSolver. It'll be 2 seconds. By the way, one thing I want to just add before this finishes, I'll finish it now actually. One thing I wanted to add here is that, remember in the last hand, our opponent wasn't even betting the flop with his entire range. He was only betting 65%, and we were still check raising. If he just increases his c-bet frequency from 65% to 80%, most people are going to c-bet range on 9-6-3 or whatever it was. Most people aren't going to check too much. So if he is the kind of player who's just going to bet everything, then our strategy just prints so much, because if he is using big sizings, we exploit him if he's using small sizings too, because we check raise a lot versus the small size. And if he puts everything into the bigger bet size, then our check raises make even more money. So this min raise versus big sizing is so nuts. Like, it just makes us so much money. Unless he is c-betting the flop perfectly in terms of frequency, and then continually perfectly versus check raise, we just get to absolutely maximally exploit him in every node. In the small node, in the large node, in the check node, in every node, we just get to crush him so hard. This is going to be another flop 8-6-3 rainbow. I've just ran it with the same conditions. I've allowed 2.05x, 2.5x, and 3x and all in as a raise size. We're going to see that we check. Our opponent, again, doesn't bet his entire range. He mixes and goes for this polarized bet sizing. And you can see that, some of these ace 10s, ace 9s don't go for a bet. We can see a lot of the kind of queen 9s, jack 9s, 10 9s are betting because they can always call a raise. We're betting most of our 8x. We are betting, kind of a reasonable, kind of relatively standard kind of polarized range. Not betting 6x that much. Not betting our 3x that much. that kind of thing. Not betting out under pairs, getting to this polarized point. So this is the bet. We can see that our most frequent bet size is going to be 11. So 863 is another board I expect people to just bet range on most of the time. So a few things can happen. They can start using small sizings. We'll punish them by check raising because they're going to have weaker hands in there because they're incentivized to put their bigger hands in their better hands in the bigger bet size. They can start betting their range, where if they do, our check raise makes even more money. Versus this, when we check raise, we can see that our opponent is supposed to call king 5 suited, call king 7 suited, call queen 7 suited, call jack 7 suited, call 10-7 suited. Like 10-7, sure. 9-7, sure, I can see that, no problem. Call queen 10 off, call jack 9 off, call queen jack off. Like, I just don't think these hands are calling versus a raise, even though our raise size is small. So essentially, what we want to end up doing is choosing a sizing where all of these hands fold, where they probably shouldn't fold. So if we run this again, we probably don't want to end up min raising because that might give away a little bit of the beast. But if we do something like a 2.15x raise size, we can see that our frequency in GTO is supposed to be 11.5%. So if we just increase our raise size to say 2.2x, let's see how lower our raise frequency is supposed to go to because we've raised our size. So just remember, 11.5 is the current sizing. So we're going to build this whole tree up again, and we're going to allow our only raise size to be 2.2x, and we're going to see how this changes some stuff. Okay, so looking at this board now, 863, only raise size 2.2x. The raise frequency before was 11.5. So let's see what happens now. The c-bet frequency says somewhat static for the imposition player, and we can see that the raise in frequency is basically, it says 11.9. You might be like, why has it gone up? That's because all the other raise sizes had a little bit frequency too. So our raise size doesn't decrease. And I think going from 48 to 106, like just imagine someone bets 4.8 big blinds and we check raise to 10.8. I think it's going to get more fold equity than like 9.6 will get. When 9.6 is literally a min raise, maybe they think we misclicked or whatever it may be. Probably the GTO sizing to go here to get fold equity, something like 11 big blinds, like try to make it look really small, but still we know against a really big sizing initially, so it doesn't matter too much. Anyway, this is this small sizing. We can see that our opponents are still supposed to be continuing king 7, still supposed to be continuing king 9, still supposed to be continuing queen jack off, queen 10 off, jack 10 off, jack 9 off, queen 9 off. So what I'm going to do here is do a node lock, and we're going to just fix these hands to fold. Any hand which we think is kind of ridiculous. So, obviously these ones are folding, obviously these ones are folding. I think all the 5x will fold. I think all the 7x will fold. I think all of the 9x here will fold. Well, not all of it, but the ones which don't necessarily wrap around straight away. Like, let's give him queen 9, jack 9, whatever. Going to make queen jack off fold, king queen off fold, king jack off fold, king 10 off fold. These hands are already folding, but just at like 75% frequency, or 95. We're just making it 100, just for visualization purposes. A7 off fold, ace 5 off fold. They're already folding. Deuces is already folding. Ace 10 off already folding. Ace 9 folding. So we're going to change it to this, and this is now going to look like visually. It's going to look like this. So it's not even that much. He's still continuing 46. He's still continuing 54% of the time. But we're going to rerun this, and I'm going to imagine that we start check raising like a motherfucker on the flop as the big blind versus the big sizing. So just going to allow this to run and let it happen. Okay, so this is finished running now, and we're going to hopefully see a really high check raise. So let's go back to here. You can see here the c-bet's going on. This is the bet. We're going to be raising. And now we're seeing that these hands are folding. But one thing which has happened here is the c-bet range has decreased a lot. So a lot of hands have gone down in terms of how often they bet. So these hands should have been at a higher frequency. So, your hands like queen 5s, queen 4s, the king jack offs, the king 10 offs, queen 10 offs, the queen jack offs. Once these hands can't get they don't want to get check raised anymore. This is why when you run the sims, and I did it in the first one, you remember I said, I'm locking in the c-bet frequency here. It's really important to lock it in here so that this strategy doesn't change too. So you're going to see, I'm going to show you, it's actually a really nice small tweak. Once it goes bet, you're going to see our check raise is now 13.3% from 11.9%. What we're going to do here is just node lock this range to just c-bet with the air part of the range. So King Jack's going to c-bet, King 10's going to c-bet, Queen 10, Queen 9, King 9, Jack 9, 10 9, Jack 10, Queen Jack. So this portion of hands, which I node locked to start folding, the solver says, okay, well, if I'm going to start folding so much, I can't have these in my betting range. But the people are still going to have these in the betting range because these hands don't have showdown value. Like Jack 9's not going to just try to check it down or whatever. Same with the 7x. Look at the 7x. This was all continuing, and now these hands are all starting to check because of the reason why. Same with all the 5x. Remember, we had the same 5x stuff? All the hands which I node locked, same with hands like Ace-7. Same with hands like Ace-5. Same with these hands here. The hands which I've node locked to now fold, what ends up happening is the solver says, okay, well, I need to do something about this, otherwise my strategy's fucked up. That's why when you node lock on a sim, you always have to make sure you node lock the street you're exploiting, but also the street before, the action before, to make sure that the solver's not kind of getting itself out of trouble. So we're going to just do this here and lock all hands, set strategy and close. And now you're going to see this heavy betting range going on there. And we can see now it's like 70-30, which is, this is probably what we're going to see from most people. We're probably going to see Queen 4 c-bet. We're probably going to see King 4 c-bet. We're probably going to see Ace 4 c-bet. We're probably going to see all of these kind of weakish hands c-bet. Ace 9, Ace 10. All of these hands were kind of in the betting range at some frequency. So, okay, King 10 was probably like a lower frequency, but Ace 10 was in there. So basically all I'm doing is getting the betting frequency up to 70%, which is probably what we expect. And then once it's going to be like this, we're going to press go. And now we're going to see what happens when we've node locked both that street, but also making sure that the solver isn't protecting itself by checking a lot more initially. This is now going, and I'm going to show you what happens when we run it. Okay, so we're now back, and we're going to have a look what happens here. We have locked in the 70% bet. Reminder that, this is not a ridiculous betting strategy. Like, I think most people are going to bet Queen Jack. Most people are going to bet Queen 10. Most people are going to bet King 10, King Jack, Jack 10, Jack 9, Queen 9, King 9. Like, this is a really, really reasonable bet-in range. There's even some hands like King 9 suited, not even in the betting range. There's some hands like King Queen, not in the betting range. Ace 10, not in the betting range. Ace 9, not in the betting range. Ace 4 suited, not in the betting range. Ace 5 suited, not in the betting range. Like, it's so easy for all of these hands to go into the betting range. Now, this is not a ridiculous, like, node lock, oh my god, I'm trying to prove my point kind of thing. This is a really, really reasonable strategy. If anything, it's probably even more. But anyway, versus this, we're going to see straight away, snap, check raise. Every hand's going to be making more EVs at check raise. It's still running actually, solver. Let's just stop it. So we see the exact results. Stop now. Let's just go through it again. So check. Again, this is not going to change because we've just been through this. And again, we're raising with all these hands. If we look at a hand like King 2 suited, we can see the EV of raising is so much higher than calling, so much higher than folding, and so much higher than a big raise. This just is the nuts strategy. You can just see the difference. The difference between, all in, like going crazy, or just this small raise size. We're making so much EV with this small raise. If we look at a hand like Jack 6, which has actually has showdown value, this is making way more as a raise than it is as a call. If we have a look at a hand like Pocket 5s, it's making way more as a raise than a call. If we have a look at a hand like King 8, it's making significantly more as a raise than a call. So yeah, really, really important to realize this, that if your opponent is betting big, even though it's very likely possible that it has GTO mechanics, it's very likely that we can exploit it because he's not controlling these mechanics perfectly. So this is I think a really important video that we're going to see more and more big betting going on in the next month or so, and this is going to help us a lot with the response to people who bet big. And if people are betting small on these boards, we also go after them because they're not going to be balanced in that regard too. So hopefully this has been very helpful and you guys can use it because I know that I think it's a really, really powerful tool. Thanks a lot and see you.